Hey everybody, welcome to the Augmented Reality Podcast. My name is Asheninity. This is presented by the Triple S League. Check out our YouTube channel for game guides, reviews, comedy, music videos, all kinds of fun gaming content, and we are going to be talking today more about Cyberpunk 2077. I'm here as always with Cybsidian, and we have a very special guest with us today. We have the Madqueen herself, the Mad Queen.
Greetings, Earthlings.
Greetings, Earthlings. So are you the queen of some extraterrestrial civilization? Is that how it works?
Well, I can explain to you, but then I'll have to kill you. And I like you already. I wouldn't want to kill you.
Is that the puppet's job? Is that Mr. Ruvver? He's your gun for hire.
That's why he hasn't been around recently, right? He's off doing contracts for you. Isn't
He's off doing contract assassinations on people.
Oh my god, you just found out.
Uh-oh.
That's bad news for you.
Apparently, Mr. Ruvver is also here and is out for blood. You guys continue the podcast. I'm going to get a head start out the door. By the way, this episode's sponsored by MMOGamerStore.com, your source for alpha and beta game keys for the latest upcoming games. Check them out, MMOGamerStore.com. So, of course, the Mad Queen is, I would say, pretty much an expert on Cyberpunk 2077 lore. That's what I'm going to say, because, you've done so much work, so many videos on your channel about the lore, about the different classes from the original pen and paper games, etc. So, why don't you tell us about your history with Cyberpunk? Like, when did you become a Cyberpunk fan, and how did it progress from there to being such a huge part of your YouTube channel?
Well, the truth is that I started playing Cyberpunk when I was, Cyberpunk 2020, obviously, when I was in high school, and I did a very long campaign of 5 years, I believe.
Oh my.
Where I was playing as solo, and finally I got really OP, too much OP, because I was the only one that wasn't dying in the campaign, and the game director had to kill me, which I got depressed about that. And the funniest thing is that when the teaser first came out, I don't know under what rock was I sleeping, because I didn't know. And I realized a couple of years later, because I made a video about, I believe it was Ghost in the Shell, that I talked about Cyberpunk, and some people in my comments asked me what Cyberpunk was, and I was writing the script for the video to explain what Cyberpunk was, and by Googling it, I found the game. And I was like, oh my god, how is it possible that there's a teaser for this game and I didn't know anything about? And I turned absolutely crazy. I looked for every small single piece of official information that was available. But every single piece, you can't believe me on that. And I looked for everything, absolutely everything. Then I started making lore videos because I absolutely adore the role-playing game. It's really, really funny. And I have lots of anecdotes from the times that I was playing that I believe that I should make a video about because some are very funny. And yeah, I know the universe so well because I've played for such a long time that I believe that I can, explain the universe for the people that is watching my channel. And also, I heard Pondsmith in different interviews saying the things that are going to be different from the original tabletop game. So it more or less gives me a vision of how the game is going to be lore-wise, not in gameplay per se, but lore-wise. I believe that if we mix the game with all the official information about the changes, we more or less can have an idea. Okay. So yes, I'm going to keep doing more lore videos.
Well, good, excellent. Keep them coming because they're really, really informative and really great. And you've got a really, you obviously have a lot of information that your average person like me who wasn't big enough of a nerd to play the games, the paper games, and of course I was just a big nerd in other ways, but
everyone has his speciality.
Well, I probably would have gotten into Dungeons and Dragons or Cyberpunk, that kind of thing, but it was during this era it was shortly after the 80s when, I'm making myself sound a lot older than I actually am.
I was like, I don't think you're that old there.
No, I went to, I was in high school in the late 90s, early 2000s, and there was still this lingering idea that Dungeons and Dragons and these real fantasy sort of role-playing games could make kids go insane. So I was always discouraged from getting into stuff like that.
Well, what I don't understand is why you were convinced by this discouraging.
Oh, I was a rebel in other ways. I had games installed on my parents' computer. They had no idea we're there. because anything violent was out of the question.
We had the same problem in Spain because in the late 90s, I believe it was, a bunch of psychos invented a role-playing game, let's call it that way, because they call it that way, called Races. And as a result of playing to this game, they killed a person. So, yeah, they really killed a person. So, when the thing was on the news, picture the image of the typical table with all the police things from the case, you had the knife they used to kill the person. Then several manuals. You could see Cult. You could see Dungeons and Dragons. They killed the person with the manuals and some character sheets and some dice. And I was like, what? And then people started to say that with role-playing games you kill people. And actually, a friend of mine who was carrying a Dungeons and Dragons manual going home got detained by police because the police officer thought that this was illegal.
Oh my goodness. It never got that serious over here, I don't think. I mean, there's always been the talk that, video games make people violent and things like that, which there's really no evidence for whatsoever. I mean, I don't know what happened with this incident in Spain, but it sounds like a fluke, a one-of kind of situation where, a person died in that situation. But
pretty crazy, yeah.
So you did a video about our podcast that we did last week, where we revealed our leaked info about Cyberpunk 2077, and we really appreciated that. That was awesome. Shout out to Darth Ruvver talking us up in your comments section. That was fantastic. So you had some things you wanted to discuss with us about that. We also had some questions that came from your comments section and our comments section. So we're going to dive into some of that Q of A. And one of the questions that I want to look at first here from Metro Orleans, I think, is how you say that. So this has to do with the character class switching that we talked about last week. So we believe that you'll be able to respec your character during the course of the gameplay. So you're not 100% locked into a class from the beginning straight through to the end. So you don't have to completely restart the game in order to reroll your character, which in a game that looks like it's going to be as in-depth and involved as this one is probably a good idea. But we were wondering also, how is that going to work into the actual gameplay? And so Metro Orleans was wondering, I wonder if you'll be able to change classes through the brain dance, since it does have the functionality to overwrite your entire personality. So this is interesting. So first of all, what is the brain dance?
Well, the brain dance is technology that is invented in the world of Cyberpunk 2020, where you can record your experiences and pass it on to another person that inserts these experiences in his brain, and then he can experience the same that you did. Memories, feelings, everything. So this is called a brain dance. Okay, and then does that person believe that they are the other person? Something like that. It's like in this film, how it was called? I believe it was Strange Days. I think it was in Strange Days that there was a business behind that. Some person used to record the emotions of people and then sell these emotions to other people that they want to experiment them. Like, I don't know, there's a moment in the film where he records a person that is running in the beach and then gives this recording to a person who can't walk for him to experiment again what it was to walk again. And it's the same principle. You can experience other people's life. So I believe that's the reason why Metro Orleans makes this question, because one of the questions that the people is asking is, how are we going to switch these characters? Because the character class is something that is related to the job that the person does. And the experience in this job is what gives you the special abilities of this kind of character. Because, for instance, if you want to be a rock star, tomorrow you buy a guitar and then you start making gigs. But in the first time that you start being a, let's call it rock star, because you're not a rock star until you have enough audience, then the power that the rock star has is that he can give order to his audience. But this is something that he acquires from years and years of doing gigs and becoming famous. So if we switch characters and suddenly one day you want to play guitar and go on gigs, you won't have this ability from the start because you wouldn't be able to, grow an audience. The same way that if you are a cop, you won't be as good as guns, that if you've been a cop for 5 years. So people is very confused about how all this switching classes is going to be, because we're going to need a very good excuse in game to be able to justify that. Apart from, people getting tired of the type of character, but the in-game excuses, that's what people is worried about.
Yeah, to do it in a way that doesn't break immersion. And so having this thing that can sort of rewrite your brain, I guess that really works.
Yeah, that's why she says about the brain dance, because this is something that can rewrite your brain without a learning process behind it. Because if you need the learning process, then switching characters is going to be really difficult.
Mm-hmm.
So in this particular case, we look at what CDPR has done before, and then we look at like the other top games in the genre of open world moving around, and most open world games have a pretty liberal use of abilities and classes, and you can drop them in and mix them around and tweak them a fair bit. Like Skyrim, for example, you max something out to 100, and then you can reset it, and you're able to then kind of move around your abilities and stuff like that a lot more. And then in games like Dragon Age, your class was definitely locked. Your class was definitely locked, especially in Origins. And this is the other extreme of the scenario. And this is what people are wondering. Is Cyberpunk 2077 going to be more like Origins, or is it to be more like Skyrim? So Skyrim, you can really rotate stuff around on the fly. And in Origins, you can't do that at all.
So the thing is that I don't believe that it's going to be good for the storytelling, that we're able to completely reset the character like you can do in, I don't know, the examples you said, that you can reset all your build. Because role-playing games doesn't work like that. And I believe that if they do so, they're going to disappoint a lot of fans. Because this would be more like trying to please everyone, and it doesn't work like that. But then again, if they do keep the abilities when you switch classes, then you're going to have some sort of multi-class, which is also absurd. Unless you're a nomad, because in a nomad pack, you can have medtechs, you can have a lot of other classes inside the nomads, and nomads are the only class that can be multi-class. But the rest of classes, it's quite difficult that you are a doctor and a rock star at the same time.
Yeah, and this is where we look at if we look at what they've done before in The Witcher, they tell a story from one particular direction.
The character has there aren't multiple origins based on your class.
No. Basically. If you're playing The Witcher, you don't even have the ability to like change classes. You're a Witcher. Period.
That's your class.
Yeah,
that's your class, and you play a single class the whole way through. So in speculation, if we have a story that's being told to us, and a protagonist, the main character of the story, happens to be, this nomad character who comes across the story, the main plot of the story, by encountering somebody who gives them a brain dance of more than one person, you can see in your head, right, where you'd be like, oh, that's how you would be able to experience every single class, starting as a single character, having this, experience of your shepherd, right? Mm-hmm. Your shepherd, and you're able, at the beginning, you're able to just pick multiple different directions, and the story still, evolves around that one central person. So if it goes like that, some multi-classing, especially if the character starts out as a nomad, then that fits completely within the lore.
Yes.
Yeah, so that would be, I think, a strong possibility. Or we end up seeing the game go an Origins route where there's a dozen or more different characters that you can start to, do you start out as a rough and tumble journalist on the streets, and then that's your class throughout the entire game? Or do you start out as a cop? Now that gives a lot of replayability, but one of the things that does is it really consumes a ton of amount of time. Like you're gonna be sinking like hundreds of hours into this game if it goes that way. Because you'll experience like one or two different stories throughout the course of the game, but then that also makes it a development nightmare, because you're basically making a dozen different games within the same game. And if a real-life game reviewer, a real-life streamer plays through the game on one story, and it's not as good as the other story, then that's a nightmare for PR, because it's like, the solo storyline was terrible versus this storyline, which was much superior, and the Doctor was, meh, or the Rocker Boy was the best, or, stuff like that. And Knights of the Old Republic, the MMO, they fell into that really hard because you had all these different classes and directions, and some people played through it in their first playthrough, which took them like 3 or 4 months to max out. And they're like, well, I was really disappointed with this story. I was really disappointed with the story of the Jedi Knight versus like the Sith Marauder versus the Smuggler had an amazing storyline. The Soldier had a really good storyline. Then they fall into that, and again, that was a nightmare for their PR.
Yeah, but I understood that in 2077 we're going to have the main storyline for all the classes, and then different storylines for the different classes. And one thing that worries me the most is if we're going to have some time at the beginning of the game to get used to the classes, to more or less know how they work before we lock ourselves in a class. The most difficult thing about this, and I realized that because now I'm trying to put a team to play Cyberpunk 2020 in my Discord, and there are people who are not very familiar with 2020. And there's people who actually believe that there exists a concept of non-combat classes in Cyberpunk, which is a common mistake because you see a rockstar and at first you believe that it's impossible this is a combat class, but I don't know, Johnny Silverhand, he was in the 4th Corporate War in the side of Militech, and he was very prominent in the war. And he was a combat character because this is Cyberpunk. You either know how to use a gun or you will be dead by now. So this is something that the game needs to explain really quick in all the classes, because the person that is not used to this universe needs to understand that all the classes are combat classes. And then you can decide for yourself that you want to do it non-lethal. But it's your choice. But you need to know how to protect yourself.
I've seen Mad Max Fury Road. I see how a Rocker Boy is a combat class. Journalists, not so much sure how that works. I don't know. They say the pen is mightier than the sword. And I suppose if it shoots a poison dart, that is definitely true.
Journalists are the first people that go to corporate wars with a camera, and they need to know how to protect themselves, because they can go with a solo or two, but in the end you can lose your solos, and you need to know how to use a weapon. And no matter what character you are, you need to know how to use a weapon, because if you don't, you are dead. That's how Cyberpunk works.
So what is a solo? I keep hearing this. I have no idea what it is.
A solo is some sort of mercenary that is a muscle for hire. You know how to shoot, you know your weapons, you have tactical knowledge, you are very aware, you have military training. Basically, it's like a bodyguard. It's most solos either work as a bodyguard or as a private security.
Okay.
I actually realized that I have another leak here that I totally forgot about. It's not a big news. It's just I just realized that in talking about this, that about the combat, that I don't think anybody's actually mentioned this officially, and I've known about it for a while from the same source as my other stuff here. Is that when you're playing through the game, the most common enemy that you're going to be fighting is some kind of a robot.
Okay.
Some kind of a robot. I mean, this is Cyberpunk 2077. Everybody is some kind of a robot.
yeah, and that's why I never mentioned it, because I'm like, well, duh, everybody knows that. Like in a bunch of the artwork and stuff like that, you're constantly fighting like robots or
but you are also going to be some kind of a robot.
Yeah. Do we know what the protagonist was? So I've seen the teaser, where you have the slow-mo bullets and everything, and it's really, really bizarre and surreal. So, who is the protagonist? Do we see the protagonist in the teaser? Is it the cyborg woman, or is it the guy with the helmet?
But that's not supposed to be in the game. I mean, that teaser was only done to hire people, to make developers interested in that game. I mean, that's not supposed to be in the game. It's
not indicative of the main plot line, the story, or the game in and of itself. It's a brief snapshot of a moment, a significant moment, but just a moment in time in a video game that they could do without showcasing a world, a story, or anything other than just what literally is there is like 5 seconds because it's all slowed down. It's essentially just 5 seconds of time that the entire trailer shows you.
No, I get that. And so
it's short, but the important thing of the trailer is not the trailer per se. They are showing that they know the game. I mean, all the details the game has, the kind of advertising that is behind the main protagonist of the teaser are brands that are in the 2020. The girl that is behind is a very important net runner in the 2020. Network News 54 is also in the manual, is also in the game. So this is more a teaser that shows how much they know about the game than a technical teaser like, oh, look, our game is going to be really beautiful.
I see. Okay. Is it an event that happened?
It's an event that happens on the day-to-day. One of the pictures that follows this one is actually of the character who was on her knees in the trailer. She's now arresting another person that's gone psycho.
Okay.
So these are not main characters in the game, as we know it so far. They could be, but we don't know. And at the time that they made it, they didn't know either.
Well, if you read the story that they tell in the official web of Cyberpunk 2077 of CD Projekt Red, they say that this teaser was created before the original, the story of the game was written. So the idea is that they're going to completely change the story. This is not part of the story that they are writing for the game. This is something completely different.
Okay. I mean, I suppose it could be worked in somehow, but I came away from the teaser thinking one of two things. Either this is an event that's central to the game's story, or that it was an event in the lore, something that happened in one of the previous games, or just something in the lore that might be referenced in the new game. You're saying it's really neither of those? It's
No, they show in the lore. I mean, they show in the typical story of a cyber psycho going crazy, and then the police trying to stop him, and then they can't, and they call the psycho squad.
So this is something that happens repeatedly in the game lore.
Yes.
Yeah. This is a regular Friday night on that particular strip of the city. And that's why in one of the next teaser images you had her, after they, deprogrammed her and got her off of going psycho, she's now in the psycho squad arresting another psycho in the next image.
Cyber psychos are the most, typical thing in Cyberpunk 2020. The only thing that is not typical is that the setting of the teaser is supposed to be the center part of Night City, where the skyscrapers are, and this part of Night City, the security they have is corporate controlled. So usually they don't have this kind of incidents there, but apart from that, it's really typical.
My mind is breaking. But anyway, there's just so much to this world that I'm not familiar with. So somebody, Mackie J. Gravit, I apologize if I'm not saying that right, had commented, switching from solo to Psycho Squad. We've already seen that in the teaser, haven't we? So that was an interesting insight. What do you think about that? And also, what does she mean by that?
Well, I'm not sure that she's a solo. The cyber psycho that we see in the teaser, I don't know what class that she belongs to, because I can't really tell. I don't know why Massey believes that she's a solo, but yeah, she is not in the Psycho Squad, that's for sure. And she says that. I believe it's a girl, I'm not sure. If you're not, I'm sorry. I really like that she says that, because it's a switch class that we see in the teaser, because she starts in whatever class she is. We are sure that she is not a police and she is not a in the Psycho Squad, because if you are in the police, you are tracked. You are tracked means that you cannot end up being a cyber psycho. So we know that she doesn't belong to this category. So she may be a media, she may be whatever other thing. And in the trailer, she starts being whatever she is, and then she switches to Psycho Squad because she ends up working with the guy that tries to detain her. So yeah, this comment is because we were thinking about how are we going to switch the classes, and that is what I said in the beginning when I said that the class is relevant to the kind of job that the person have. So this is a very good in-game excuse to switch the classes, but the problem is that you can't choose because you are in whatever class you are, and then you switch to a very specific class, which is Psycho Squad into the cop.
Right.
But this is a good excuse. It's a good excuse.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not pretty sure I did explain myself properly. I am sorry if I didn't.
No, I got it. I think overall what we're going to see as far as like the integration and switching, there's going to be some major events in the game, because otherwise...
Well, I'd like to say another thing about that, because this is something that we didn't think when we explained the leak, is that inside the classes, you have different jobs. For instance, if you're a cop, you can be either a cop or you can be in the Psycho Squad. If you're a tech, you can be a techie or you can be a med tech. Into the game, are we going to be able to make this distinction? What do you believe?
I think so. And judging from everything that I know about general game development, they don't want to give you 24 classes right off the bat. They want to kind of keep things as simple as they can with sticking to the general story and the general direction as much as possible, which is why Mike Pondsmith said, and why I think this really is a big tell, that there's subtlety in the classes, and that the subtlety of difference is there, but it's not overwhelming. And I think that's what he was inferring. It wouldn't be overwhelming, but at the same time, if you're excited to play as a journalist or as a rocker boy, I'm going rocker boy. Everybody should know this now. I'm definitely going to go rocker boy. That you're not going to get overwhelmed by the choice, and you're not going to get overwhelmed necessarily by everything, but it'll be subtle and it'll ease you into it. And that's why I believe that it's going to be more like a general open world that we're more common with in the past few years than something that is really limiting, like Dragon Age Origins, or the going back even further, like Neverwinter Nights, where it's like, more of a D&D setup, where it's like you roll your class. That's the first thing you do in the game, is you roll a class, period. And then you have maybe some light multi-classing that you can do.
Well, I discussed this subject with another person in my channel, and I just remind now, and I can't find who said that. I'm so sorry. But he gave me an idea of how this choosing classes thing could work. Is that if you take your own decisions in the beginning of the game, these decisions may make you go to a very specific class without having a system where you have to choose from the start without knowing exactly what a class does.
Yeah, I had the same thought when we were discussing it before, and I kind of like that. If they almost set up a test arena in the beginning, not like a literal test arena, but like if the first part of the game poses you a bunch of choices, and then your class is chosen based on how you play or how you make different decisions, I could see that being really interesting. For me, that would be great. But I could also see people getting frustrated with that because they wind up in a different class than they want to be in. Like the people who are familiar with the lore, stuff like that. I could see that being a good thing or a bad thing.
Maybe you can have both, because actually in the first official information that we have regarding this game, they said that you were going to have a system that was similar to Fallout 2, where you have a multi-class system, and maybe you can choose a class, or you can choose to have no class in the beginning, and then let the story decide for you.
Yeah, choice is always good. I think that's a good idea if they decided to go that way with it.
Honestly, if this plays out and plays like Fallout 2, that's the best of all the world, because I love stats and numbers and getting to put points into stuff. Like, that's just, I love that about a good RPG. And if that's
a good thing. That's a good thing, but I'm so afraid that we end up having a menu like Dark Souls.
Yes, yeah. And now I think when they said in The Witcher, they have a little bit of a sprawling, like, pick this ability is tied to this ability. It's really basic. It's not a deep system, but I think in this one, the way that it was put to me is that, think about it more like old school. I'm talking about like Vanilla and Burning Crusade, like WoW, where you have talent trees that you go down. And once you start into one, you more or less kind of committed yourself. So that put into kind of a web, sprawling tech thing, so that it looks and feels a little bit more advanced, a little bit kind of like Dark Souls or maybe Path of Exile kind of thing. That offers a huge amount of variety and directions that you can go. Even FORTNITE's a little bit like that with some of their systems. Is like you head down a particular direction and you're more or less committed to that, but you can go down any direction that you want right away. So, But then absolutely, I mean, this is the creators of The Witcher. We're definitely going to have storyline stuff that affects your character as well.
Well, now that you mentioned The Witcher, I must confess that one of the things that I liked less about the game was the build.
Yeah,
Because actually,
the
they lost my interest pretty quick with this, because at the beginning, I didn't pay attention to the abilities, because the first abilities that you have to unlock, they are not abilities per se. They are just doing the things that you already have to, you already know how to do, but just you do them better. They are not abilities. And in Cyberpunk, you have abilities that you learn to do new things, and that's how you build a character. Because then you can have a character that knows how to do this stuff, and then you can have another character that knows how to do completely different stuff. So I really believe that they don't follow the same rules they followed in The Witcher 3.
No, and I think they know that too, because when you hear them talking about it, and you hear how much time, like I've listened to every interview Mike has done on this, and one of the key things that he keeps on putting out there is how much time he spends with them on the classes and how the classes convert into gameplay. The lead developers and the people that are heading up the project will come out to Seattle and spend a couple of days with Mike going over stuff. And I'm convinced that they're going over the classes and abilities, gameplay stuff, and the interaction back and forth. Because if you look at what they've done up to this, they are really good with RPGs, but they're not really good with the classes and how the classes and the gameplay can affect it. You know, The Witcher is great. I have 2 complaints about The Witcher. The first, same as yours, the abilities and the how you spec your character out is really simplistic. It's incredibly simplistic. And the other thing I didn't like about it is I couldn't stand playing a guy, because it's like I'm looking at a guy's butt all day long. It's not something that interests me at all.
But you're supposed to be him.
Yeah.
You're not supposed to be looking at his butt. It's supposed to be him. So you're looking at your own butt. Yeah.
I guess I'm looking at my own butt. Something I wouldn't enjoy to do in any situation. There's no situation I would enjoy looking at my own butt. But I think that's really where they've hit a bit of a wall in the very early days of this, which is why they've relied so much on getting Mike Pondsmith to directly help craft that. The lore and the story, he's mentioned that they were able to take it, and they were able to prove very quickly that they could move in the direction that he wanted to. And so to me, that seems to say that they're spending a lot of time with Mike specifically about the gameplay functionality and making sure that that's keeping within the concept that he had. And that's, I think, the best way that they'll find success is making sure that you have good abilities.
Well, I believe that we are missing here a very important point when we were discussing about the abilities, going back there again. Mm-hmm. Because in Cyberpunk 2020, you have 2 types of abilities. You have the abilities that you learn, and you have the abilities that you implant in your brain. That they are not as good as the real thing. Mm-hmm. But all the time we're considering that you are going to acquire new abilities in the typical PX style. So you are going to learn them, and this way you're going to build your character, but you are also going to be able to buy your abilities.
Are the abilities that you can implant in any way limited by the class that you are, or the things you already know?
No, not at all. Not at all, because the abilities you have for your class is because you are living your class every day, and this gives you experience in the things that you do. That's why you acquire abilities from that. But if you just go to a shop and buy an implant to learn how to shoot better, you really don't need that kind of practice.
Okay, so there are class-specific abilities, and then there are things that they're just sort of general abilities that anyone can learn.
I mean, in a tabletop game, this is for the game director to decide. But usually when you use an implant to acquire a new ability, this is not as good as the real thing, because you can't improvise. Because you have very specific knowledge about that, but as you are not used to use it, you cannot improvise. So it's like having the ability, but a little less ability.
Implanted abilities, are these abilities that are native to a different class, or are they abilities that are just sort of generic, like shoot better, or...
Whatever you want. Whatever you want, and whatever the game director allows you to, but whatever money can buy.
So if I'm a journalist, but I decide I want to learn to play mad riffs on the guitar, I could just like jam that in my brain.
Exactly.
But I'd only be able to play exactly what I learned.
You wouldn't have the main ability of the class. For instance, if you're a rock star, you have the ability to give orders to a crowd of people because they follow you. And this is something that you cannot implant in your brain because you spend the time building an audience and so.
Right.
Things
and
like that.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, for sure.
You can have it.
So there are things that you acquire from just being that for a long time. Like.
But anything that requires learning, you can buy it.
Right.
And implant it in your brain.
Like you could implant the ability to write with perfect grammar, but you wouldn't have necessarily the influence of, being a respected journalist that, would get picked up by the big newspapers, things like that.
Yeah, more or less like a remote.
Okay, that's really interesting. That's not something you see in your typical medieval style RPGs.
Yeah, I believe that this is why the ability system in this game is going to be so difficult to program because there are so many factors. Like it's insane.
If you have a system in that it's not 2 buttons later you're playing a completely different class, but if it's something that you can gradually switch over to, that is the best of both worlds because it doesn't really affect you if you don't utilize it. And then if you do utilize it, it affects you in a positive way because it's not an overpowered system. It's just an easy system. So in that, we have to be really clear that if they pull it off correctly and if they pull it off well, and if you're not a fan of the tool, then you just don't use it.
Yeah, but the word correct has a lot of meanings depending on who's listening.
Yes, yeah, that's true.
I believe that Mike Pondsmith, if he's directing this project, is for something, and he's the first that wants the game to be as much loyal as it can to the original game. So I believe that we should trust him.
And I think he's shown that. And he's definitely shown that he's definitely shown that he's on top of it in all of the interviews and stuff that we hear coming out from CD Projekt Red, is that they're really trying to do their best job with it. And they're utilizing the information that you love about the series to do that in the best possible way. Of course, there's going to be it's not going to be a pen and paper game because it's no longer a pen and paper game. That's totally different.
Well, I am hearing this kind of comment a lot lately, and in a discussion we have in the official forums of Cyberpunk 2077, the ones that CD Projekt Red owns, and there's a lot of people saying that I expect they don't do like BioWare, because people are saying that Mass Effect Andromeda was bad because they tried to please everyone, but the thing is that the game's bad because it's technically bad, because everything is bad. So it's not a matter of trying to please everyone, it's a matter of put a little effort in what you do. So as I heard this kind of discussion a lot lately, where everybody's blaming BioWare for doing a bad game, for trying to please anyone, and that's not true. I mean, it was simply bad. And I don't believe that this is going to happen here. I mean, they can't afford it. They're sitting in a lot of cash that they are going to spend into this, and they need to be really, really sure of the commercial success of this game, because they're going to double or triple the amount of people they have working for CD Projekt Red in this project. We're talking about a lot of people. We're talking about a lot of money. So they have to be really, really careful what they are doing. I don't believe that they cannot fool around because they can't afford it.
I think they definitely are putting the effort in. I think they are definitely going to produce a good product, but I honestly don't think you can make a class system that makes everybody happy, but I don't think that that's going to make or break the game. If it's done really poorly, that could break the game. That could cause it to be a colossal flop, but that's very, very, very unlikely.
If Nutella, that is Nutella, there's people who doesn't like Nutella, it's impossible to make a gameplay that pleases everyone.
And the last word there goes to Mr. Ruvver, ever the wordsmith. We're going to have to break this in 2 parts, so we will be back next week with the Mad Queen, Mr. Ruvver, Cybsidian, and myself, Asheninity. There will be tons more discussion about Cyberpunk 2077. We get into the mechanics of the game world, and whether or not there should be a silent protagonist, etc. So be sure to like, sub, follow, sit there and stare at your screen for a week. Whatever you need to do so you don't miss the next episode of the Augmented Reality Podcast right here on the Triple S League. We'll talk to you next week. Thanks for listening to Augmented Reality, presented by the SSS League. If you appreciate this weekly content, please consider becoming a Patreon supporter. Patrons get exclusive access to podcast outtake videos, downloadable music, an RSS feed of our podcast, and more. See patreon.com/the SSS League for details. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe.